Hey, I'm Dylan. I'm Scott's son, also known as Jack Dillard in the Joe Dillard series.
Hi, I'm Kody. I'm Scott Pratt's daughter. And I would be Lily, but there are some. She is me and she is not.
And I'm Jess. I'm not related, totally normal person, and I'm reading these books for the very first time. This is Scott Pratt versus Joe Dillard, the podcast, a behind-the-scenes look at the best-selling Joe Dillard series. Scott Pratt is a best-selling author who is known for his Joe Dillard series, a legal thriller series about a lawyer, Joe Dillard, who is fed up with defending the bad guys. The twist? Joe Dillard is based on a real man, his author, Scott Pratt. His books are based on real cases and real people, including his two children, Dylan and Kody. We're going to delve into the man behind the man. We're going to read Joe Dillard's story through the lens of Scott Pratt's story. I'll be reading his books for the first time, and Dylan and Kody are here to walk me through what was fact and what was fiction. But first, let's learn more about who Scott was through the eyes of those who knew him best, his kids. Dylan, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I am assuming that anybody who's here probably has at least heard of the Dillard series. So in a lot of ways, if you're familiar with it and if you've read the books, I share a lot of similarities with Jack Dillard. I obviously had a really, really close relationship with my father, with Dad. We blurred a lot of lines. There weren't many boundaries. It was something between best friend, father, son, mentor, and then business partner, employee, boss. I mean, it was like all of those things, some amalgamation of all those things all into one. As far as me, I come from a background in athletics. I played baseball in college, and kind of very similar track to what Jack did in the books, but honestly, with a lot more, several more speed bumps along the way. But yeah, so nowadays, with Dad being gone, and Mom being gone too, it's kind of it's my job, it's my day job every day to try to continue to drive our books. And in a lot of ways, it's my job to kind of be the steward of Dad and Mom too, like their legacy, and keep everything kind of going into the future. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. Kody, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I am 30 years old.
You just hit the 30 club.
I did. I hit 30. It's real. I live in northern Kentucky, right across from Cincinnati. But before that, I was in northeast Tennessee, which is where all the books are out of. I am who Lily Dillard is sometimes loosely and sometimes not loosely at all based off of. Do you feel like Dylan's more like Jack than you are like Lily, or do you feel? Yeah. Well, it depends.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where you read it and sometimes it feels really accurate, and then sometimes you're like, "What? That's not me." Yeah, I do feel in general like Dylan was more of like a character that was more central. Like Lily, he took some artistic liberties with Lily here and there with like, you have to have some like drama in books, like some outside drama.
Yeah.
So like her relationship with her husband, which is really funny. My husband's name is Andy Rowe and her boyfriend husband's name in the book is Randy Lowe.
I did not know Andy was in it. That's hilarious.
Randy Lowe. Andy's butt was on the covers for a long time.
Oh my gosh.
He was the original.
We sold 1 million books like that.
Of Andy's butt.
Claim to fame used to be that like his ass was on 1 million.
I mean,
covers
it's him
out
in a
there.
suit running
On
upstairs.
Kindles.
It's not just his butt.
Naked.
This
butt.
is really funny.
Yeah, he was really upset
when Randy's
when we changed
introduced
it.
in the books. Maybe we'll have to have Andy on the
Yeah,
podcast.
he definitely comes. Oh, Randy
the
Lowe.
The real Andy is way different than Randy Lowe.
Yeah.
he's like
So
the
Randy Lowe,
sweetest,
yeah.
brightest, most compassionate human being on the planet, and Randy's kind of a butthole, I guess, in the books. A little bit.
Dylan is definitely, though, I just think Mom and I had a relationship, and I absolutely love my dad. I was a daddy's girl. But Dylan and I both were super close with the other parent as well. But Dylan kind of grew up doing sports with Dad and kind of being his right-hand man. I grew up in the dance studio with Mom, so I was kind of her right-hand woman.
That makes sense.
In the same way that Dylan now runs his books and his publishing, I still run her studio from 5 hours away. So it's kind of like, I think that Dylan was kind of more of a central, almost character to Joe's evolution almost kind of thing. And so Lily is similar to me, but then he was able to kind of use her and her relationships with others for some more dramatic effect.
Yeah.
I think than Jack, maybe.
Well, you're going to have the chance to set the record straight on this podcast of what is you and what's not you.
What's me and what's not me. I know as we go through.
Okay, so give me obviously a lot of this podcast is going to be about your dad, and, we'll dive into that. So we don't want to go too deep, talking about him. But if you were just meeting somebody in passing and they asked, who's your dad? How would you describe him?
That's a
big question. Big question. Complicated. He was the most compassionate, conflicted, complicated, charismatic, just going with the C words. Just unbelievable individual I ever met. In so many ways, we had a really complicated relationship. Just because, kind of like I described before, there were a lot of lines that were blurred in terms of just what was my role, what was his role in several different ways. But he, with our family, the way we were raised, the way there definitely was dark. There were a lot of things that weren't perfect. There really were some things that were downright crazy at times, but overall, I couldn't have asked for a better father and a better human being to be raised by. And that's one thing I've always, no matter what, no matter how crazy things were, for a variety of reasons, which you will find out, he was always so loving and so giving of himself and of his time, which was really important. And it took me a long time to realize that. I guess that's probably the relationship that a lot of kids have with their parents. But I really, especially mid-20s, late 20s, now I'm 31, as time goes, history just gets kinder and kinder to Dad. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, he was complicated. He was a pain in the ass. But I could not have possibly loved him more deeply or respected him more than I did. So
yeah, that's awesome. Kody, what about you?
If you asked who Dad was, when you meet people in college who haven't met your family, or now we meet people who are never going to know our parents, which is a really weird thing when you get close to people when you get older. Because I think we feel so close, like they were such a huge part of who I am and who he is probably. And it's hard now to know people and feel like I know them well if they didn't know my parents. Yeah. It's like it's a piece missing that they'll never know. So when I just remember randomly when I've tried to explain him to somebody who's never met him, or like a friend who's never met him in college or whatever, I'd always say my dad is one of the most he's like the most beautiful conundrum you'll ever meet. Like, I've never met anybody else like him. I've never heard of anybody else like him. And I think that that's why we're trying to do all this stuff now, that it's important, because he was a brilliant, one-of-a-kind, beautiful, dark individual. And I think when he was alive, he kind of kept to himself, and it was all about the books, and he kind of didn't really want it to get personal because it, you know, it's kind of his own little life. And I think that's the way he did things. But now that he's gone, I think that there's such a story there, his life and who he was, and even just how it related to the Joe Dillard series. There's so much there that we just feel it needs to be told and it needs to be shared. So starting with like who was Dad, like I could spend hours trying to explain a giant circle around who he was at the core, because he was so complicated.
Yeah.
And I say conundrum because he did things that completely were at war with each other, and it's because he was always so at war with himself our whole lives. And he was beautiful in that he built us to have a deep respect for him and for Mom, but for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think especially as a female, that's a really great thing to have in a dad, that they teach you to love and respect yourself. It kind of made my foundation as a woman I grew up a lot quicker than a lot of the girls around me, and it wasn't for anything bad. It's just because I just had this sense of respect for myself, and that I just wasn't going to compromise on. And I think a lot of that had to do with my mom also, but my dad, it was just, there's something in the unconditional love that he would give you that as a young girl growing up, like our friends always kind of magneted to our house. Yeah. People have always done that with our family, because I think that we just have this kind of magnetism in how our parents fought, and there was a lot, they're loud and passionate, but there's just this deep love there that I think is really rare. Yeah. And I think it drew people our whole lives. And even like I would see girls my age that had different relationships, whether their dad wasn't around, right, whether they didn't have a real great relationship with their dad, or even if they had a relatively good relationship but the dad wasn't nearly as involved. Yeah. Our parents were very involved in our lives. Yeah. It just was a different, I don't know, there was just something special about it. I think Dad had just a magnetism to him, but he just had this kind of animalistic, he could always just revert to like basic human emotions in a really big way, where the rest of us kind of have this filter. Yeah. And he, I think the biggest thing being his kids and his family is just knowing that he literally would die for you in a second. Like, you know, people say that he would no doubt step in front of a bullet. Not only would he step in front of a bullet, he would kill
for you too.
Whoever did it to you. Do what?
He'd kill for you too.
It was like, and that would, people say that he would legit, like, I just had this confidence, like, even with young boys, it's like, dude, I wouldn't do it. Yeah.
Don't mess.
I mean, I'm going to feel sorry for you if you do anything to me, because he's literally going to hunt you down and kill you and spend the rest of his life happily in jail. Like, it's, there was just a confidence to that. So he's like that too. My younger
years as like Dad's henchman.
Yeah, Dylan is just like that too.
The aforementioned little boys. I got sicked on a few here and there, and it didn't go well.
But that's like that's the duty of the older brother.
Well, Dylan was a little more intense about it than most older brothers, but it's because my dad was so intensely protective. And a lot of his physicality, and the reason that he was so intense about stuff like that, is he was a very intense person. Like, he didn't care. He'd go violent. Right. Because he was in, I think some of that had to do with him being in the military. Yeah. I think you just learn, even growing up, like, if he saw something wrong or whatever, like, he was going to go fight. There was no, like, oh, I'm scared. Like, that was part of his almost ego, like, macho type, and Dylan's like that too.
Is he really, I mean, I would think if you're, like, a lawyer too, like, you're very justice-oriented.
Yeah, he's very black and white.
Yeah.
He always, even pre-law, I mean, I remember, like, when we were younger, it was almost like his sense of justice in the world was innate. Like,
Yeah.
it really, it was coded into his DNA almost. And if he ever saw injustice, even if it was hard, even if it was wrong, whatever, he felt he wouldn't be idle. Like, where most of us are just like, keep moving.
It's not my thing.
Live
Yeah.
life. Dad would stop whatever he was doing and address it.
Yeah.
Which is a rare, sometimes inconvenient quality. But
He burned some bridges here and there that probably
He
didn't
burned
have to be
lots of
burned.
bridges,
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think most authors, the stories they write and tell are probably the more exciting than their
Yeah.
lives. Dad was kind of the opposite. Like, not that his stories weren't exciting, they were, but the actual person that he is in his life
Yeah.
is almost more, I think, interesting and complicated and beautiful than his books.
Yeah.
And his books are great.
Yeah.
But I think that's why we're kind of doing all this at this point now that he's gone, because there's just so much there.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what's like. It is like the Scott Pratt story might be more interesting than the Joe Dillard story.
I think it is actually.
And that's the
it's
untold
more
story.
Yeah, it's more
fair.
complicated, definitely. But I think it might be a better story.
So what did you guys think? Speaking of Joe Dillard and the books and all that jazz, what did you think when your dad told you that he was going to write a book? Like, how did that all go down?
I don't know.
you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
You go first. You have a better memory than me.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So it was a really tumultuous time for our family. We were in high school. This was right after Dad had been through. He had basically been drawn and quartered publicly because of some mistakes he had made as a lawyer, and we'll just go ahead and there's a lot more to this, but he was above the fold on the front page of our local newspaper like 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
In the space of like 3 months.
And the police kept coming
like
and
local
getting him.
lawyer disgraced and the whole thing. And at that time, my parents and I've learned, like, looking back, obviously hindsight's 20/20. At the time, Kody and I don't think realized this at all, but they were very much living paycheck to paycheck. Like there was zero for either one of them. Like, they had both grown up. Well, Dad especially had grown up like lower
Poor,
class. Like, maybe they had never had any money, so he had never developed any sort of financial acumen. And my mom was the same way, although they had a little bit more in the way of means, but her mother was her mother. So they like that's a whole different thing. But anyways, long story short, there wasn't a lot of financial know-how in the household. They were very impulsive with our finances. So you know, Kody and I, we had no idea what was going on, but basically, like, all of a sudden we're in this house and living this life, and it's like, oh my God, this is great. But realistically, my parents were living paycheck to paycheck, and no matter how much money they made together, they were spending every bit of it.
Yeah.
And not
We're in a
putting
big house
anything
on the
back.
lake.
There was no rainy day
Lots of-
fund.
Yeah.
So
There's lots of nice things
when my
around.
dad lost his law license, he didn't just lose it. I mean, he was disbarred.
He also decided not to fight that, though. I mean, it was a little bit.
Right.
He
right.
could have
No,
fought
I
it
mean,
and
that's,
gotten it back. and
No,
then
I
he
agree.
just-
That was a much deeper story. That definitely is a much. There's a lot to that, but he was disbarred. The fact that he was disbarred, he completely lost his ability to generate any kind of livelihood in a situation where we were living paycheck to paycheck, and
Right.
it's just like, oh my God, what do we do now?
things just started disappearing.
So he
For
was
real.
desperate.
No, they
We
came
were
to
all desperate.
cars
Oh
in the
well,
night, like-
it was wild.
Yeah.
Wild time. Wild time.
Wild times.
But I remember. So here's the actual story. So Dad and I had a baseball camp at Vanderbilt. I'm driving. He's in the passenger seat reading, and he's reading The Lincoln Lawyer by Michael Connolly. And Dad had even growing up, we knew he had a background in writing, that he was a really sharp dude, and he had been a journalist. He had always been doing stuff, writing poems or writing stories, or just he just had a knack for writing, and he had kind of the itch. He just always was on the side. So as we're going to this baseball camp coming back, this is kind of after all the crap has hit the fan. Dad's reading this book, and by the time we get back, he's read it, and he ends up telling my mom, "This is how I'm going to save us. I'm going to write books. I can do this, and I can do this as good or better than him."
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
as good or better than him is Michael Connolly in The Lincoln Lawyer, which is hilarious. But that was Dad. That was how his brain worked. Like he
was always
was
mounted.
weird, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely wasn't an optimist per se, but he was. When it really came down to it, he believed in himself, and he believed in his abilities, and he believed in what he was capable of, and you know. Here we
And he
are.
also couldn't do something small. He struggled with stuff like that. Like it couldn't just be,
No.
I'm going to get a little menial job for a while, maybe make a little to meet, ends meet. It was always, I've got to provide for the entire family for the rest of their lives and their children's
he had
lives.
one speed.
Like
it was extravagance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is very
All out. What's the saying? You know, you shoot for it. I'll shoot for the moon. If I miss, I'll be among the stars. Like,
Yeah.
Dad was that type of human being. It wasn't anything he was going to do. He was full speed ahead.
Yeah.
So
well,
yeah.
law school, he commuted every single day on a motorcycle to Knoxville, an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back
Oh my
with two
gosh.
children at home. Like that's how he got through law school on
Yeah.
a motorcycle,
Oh my gosh.
commuting every single day. Like it just, what
Yeah.
human
Wild.
does that?
Yeah.
He just,
Wild
Yeah.
times. But kind of back to the original question. So I kind of wanted to like lay down at least some context for what was going on. How I felt about it. I didn't really know. Honestly, I was in high school. I was having a lot of success in baseball, and at that time, you know, most of us kind of go through that stage where you kind of deify your parents, and then as you get older, you kind of realize that they're real human beings, and
Yeah.
you see a lot of flaws, and then eventually you kind of get to a sort of you kind of make a peace with it, you know, because you realize they did the best that they could. At the time, I was very much in like the deified stage, and Dad was, I mean, he made some mistakes, but he was also completely railroaded in a lot of ways, and he also was a master, obviously, storyteller. Like he could get you on his side about anything because he was just so passionate and so articulate about the things that were going on. So anyway, he just was so passionate about, I am going to do this. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this. I am going to write a best-selling novel. I'm going to sell it to a New York publishing house. I'm going to become a best-selling author, multimillionaire, and I'm going to save us. And we're not going to have to leave this house. We're going to get to stay in this house, you know.
Yeah.
And at that time, I remember thinking, this is crazy. This is a long shot, but I believed in him. I really did, and because I had seen him faced with hard things, and I had seen him conquer them every time. Like I really hadn't seen Dad fail, really, at anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a weird. Obviously, it was weird. It's like, okay, local
big
law
one.
didn't work out, but I'm gonna go be John Grisham now.
Right.
It's like, okay, yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, I it's like shit. I think he can do it. He could probably do it. You know, he's the man. I've never seen him not deliver on anything he said he was going to deliver on.
Yeah.
Well, the crazy thing is he did do it.
Yeah.
It just took. He had to learn how to write books, how to plot books. I mean, it just takes such a... And then he got published by a New York publisher, and then he had to get his rights back from them because they weren't selling it good enough. Like, to get to where he was that best-selling author, it just took, Dylan, not 10 years, but a while.
It took 5 years.
Yeah, but 5 years
Basically.
is
5 years.
insane
Yeah.
for him to get up to where he got to. But for him, it wasn't good enough, because we did lose that house.
Okay.
And then we lost the house after that, and then they were in a basement. Like, a lot of things happened after that made him feel like he was a failure.
Yeah.
All the while, he was actually doing
Yeah.
what he said he was going to do.
Yeah. It just took time.
It just, that stuff takes,
Yeah.
Most people more than 5 years.
Yeah.
It takes them like 20 or 30 to get like that big of a series and
Yeah.
to sell it and whatever. But, yeah.
So did he tell you guys that you were going to be in it? Like, that he was basing it on his own life? Or
I think that came... The weird thing with us, though, is like, I think most teenagers, you think like they're kind of out of touch with their parents. They don't really care. They don't really live a cohesive life. A lot of teenagers
like
kind of
you're
go
just
do their own
there,
thing.
yeah.
Or if you're like angry with your parents when you're a teenager and like your life's kind of going down, like all the stuff starting to disappear. Our lives were in kind of a weird flux. Like, mom and dad were up and down. We were very much the teenagers, and they raised us to be that way. We cared about them, and we cared about their happiness and their mental health. And I think a lot of like when dad said, hey, I'm going to do this. This is insane, but I'm going to do this. I think there was a lot to us where we were like, they need this hope.
Yeah.
They need this. So it was like, okay, yep. Mm-hmm. There was not, we were never going to say no. Like we were
all on the same team. It was like, whatever you got to do, man. So I would say to you that I don't think necessarily there was like a conversation where it was like, are you okay with this? It was more like, this is how I'm doing this. Isn't it going to be great? And we were just like, yeah, perfect.
I don't think we ever thought anything of it.
More plot points. Yeah, I don't really remember ever getting like a memo.
Yeah.
I just remember like reading some stuff and like, oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah,
oh, gosh,
okay.
That's
yeah,
me.
that's a lot. Oh, wow, we actually had that conversation. That is, oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. But in a lot of ways, that's what made Dad's writing. It's not what made it so riveting, but it's a lot of what made him so engaging. Is that these stories that he would tell were actual real things, and he would just kind of massage different parts of it to fit his narrative. Mm-hmm. But he had, every story he was telling, he had experienced those emotions. He had interacted with those human beings. He had been there watching those human beings go through these situations. Mm-hmm. So that's why everything he writes, it really does have such a ring of truth to it. And I think that's what makes them so sticky for people. Like we have so many people that are just so gracious, and they reach out and they just say how incredible the books have
or that
been,
they feel like they're part of the family almost.
Yeah, like that is the phrase over and over and over and over and over that we hear all the time is people feel like they are a part of the family, and it's, I mean, they are in a lot of ways, because they have lived through that series.
He was so good at writing
what our family has lived.
And I think also that Dad was complicated, and sometimes his brain was so busy. Like sometimes he was very self-destruct. He's kind of his own worst enemy. But there was so much stuff going up there a lot that he couldn't always say what he thought about things or felt about things. Sometimes when you were around him, sometimes he was there, but sometimes he wasn't.
Yeah.
A lot of the time he was up in his brain. Like,
Yeah.
and it just, you knew those days when he was kind of gone. And I think reading his books sometimes it was kind of nice because he kind of told the way he felt about you.
Yeah.
He kind of described you in a beautiful way, and he described his conversations with you that you actually had, saying all these things that he didn't really say.
Yeah.
Because you don't say, you're not like, man, you're just such a great, you're beautiful.
Right.
Like, I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
love
yeah.
that conversation we had, and I thought that you were just great while we were having
Yeah.
that conversation.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you don't say stuff like that. So it's like,
Yeah.
we would read these conversations when we were even now, like when we were teenagers. And I know at some point the conversation's coming up. It's probably this book where when mom, no spoilers, but gets what she gets.
Yeah.
And the conversation, I remember in the books, reading the book, thinking, you know, where we were when we had the conversation and what we all did leading into the conversation were like a little different in
Yeah.
real life. But the actual kind of go around of the conversation was very, very similar
Yeah.
to what we did. And it, when we had it, I'm not like, wow, we're a really great fan. This is really
Right.
great that we talk like this and we do stuff like this. Like, you don't think about that.
Right.
But when he represents it in a book from a place of like how much he loved his family, you know, just
Yeah.
looking at you that way and the way that we interacted, it's just really, it's nice.
No, I
Yeah.
think that's a really interesting thought because I think just, you know, obviously I have parents, everyone does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the idea of, you know, you have conversations, but it's like you said, you don't talk to people about the conversations that you have with them.
Or what
and so
they
you
thought
don't-
of you during
Yeah,
it,
you don't
or-
always get the takeaway from that. And so in a way, it's kind of interesting to have that like immortalized forever. Like, do you feel like there's like a part of you that's like so grateful that he wrote all that out? Like you
I
kind
think
of
his
have that.
just the way he worded it's him
Yeah.
in a book, and it's not just about. I think more important to me, it's cool to see how he wrote about me and about Dylan too, but the way that he wrote about Caroline Dillard, every little moment of how beautiful she was, of how their conversations, like, and you know, our parents had a lot of ups and downs, like
Right.
they were a little more explosive than Caroline and Joe, but in general, they have a lot of the same arguments in the books that they did in real life. Just like hearing that, not hearing reading, but I think just he loved her so much,
Yeah.
and he couldn't always say it. You know, it's not like he was going to be like, "Oh, the glint in her eye, Kody. Did you see
Right,
the
you don't-
smile that
yeah,
she
you
looked
don't
at
talk
me today?"
to people like you would write about them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that their story kind of being their love story being immortalized, and not just that, like her fight with cancer and what he thought about it
Yeah.
and how we dealt with it as a family, and how, like, I think he was just a special person in a lot of ways in his relationships with people. And not only were the relationships beautiful, but he was an even more beautiful writer. So it
Yeah.
almost like encapsulated it
Yeah.
better than just remembering it. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm super excited to dive in because I don't know your parents at all.
Yeah.
And I think like you said, it's like one of those people that like you get to know them and it's like there's a whole part of me that you like don't even
Mhm.
know. So I'm excited because I feel like it's going to make me understand you guys better, like
Mhm.
learning about, you know, your parents.
sure.
But I'm also excited for the books because I've heard they're great.
Yeah. They're pretty cool.
They're really well received.
Yeah.
one thing to kind of piggyback on what she said, just real quick. I almost think about the Dillard series in a lot of ways like a diary, because it really is a kind of a diary and a chronicling of a lot of the stuff that our family went through. Obviously, not like the cases and the big
Right.
crazy stuff that's going on in the books, but like a lot of the family stuff, it really is like you like put a timeline of our lives up against when these books were published, and it's exactly what we were dealing with,
Yeah.
you know, kind of going through all those times. So
That's crazy.
anyway, yeah, it's
awesome.
what
I
it's
think
super
it's
wild.
It's a unique thing for you as, you know, children of your parents to have like this, you know, my parents won't be around forever. I will not have a book series that immortalizes
Yeah,
my relationship. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. It's unique. I think too, probably back to what you were saying, like you didn't get like a memo of like, hey, I'm putting you in the book. And probably like when he first started writing it, you're like, oh, that's cool. But you didn't know what it was going to become.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like hindsight's 20/20, but at the time it's like, yeah, sure,
Right.
whatever. Like, you know, like you said, like we believed that he could do it, but it's like you don't know. Hindsight's 20/20, and so
Well, we were also like 16, 15.
Right.
We're gonna be
You
like,
were-
no, you know, I have rights.
yeah. And also
you can't write me.
You
in a
had
book.
other you know friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, sports, school, dance. You had all sorts of other stuff going on too. So
Well, and we just weren't those kind of kids.
yeah,
That would, you know, I guess some teenager would probably be like, no, I don't know.
yeah. I probably
It
think
never
was
even
cool.
would occur to me.
Yeah.
To be like, I'm not cool with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No.
Yeah.
Until
Never even
Randy
thought
showed
about it.
up, and then you were like, wait a second.
No, I thought it was funny. Because it's not really how we are.
Right.
You know, the way I think about it is we were just so easy for him. He didn't have to worry about us at all. So he had to.
There you go. He had to make
He had
stuff
to
up.
make it up.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to look at it.
I think there's
Well-
a lot of truth to that. No, very much. But you know what's interesting? Even like the stuff that went on with them, he drew from things and situations and other people that we knew that actually went on.
Yeah.
And he just supplanted
Just
it
stuck
onto
it on
them,
us.
which Kody was like, "You prick." But
Yeah.
it's like, well, sorry, honey. Like I need some.
I need some
a B.
sort of
I
drama.
need a B or a
we
C
also had a
plot
child
here.
out of wedlock.
You guys are the sacrificial lambs.
That's right. That's right. He's like, you're too boring. I need some drama.
He really needed to.
I know. Can you kids just like ratchet it up?
Sorry,
a little bit?
Dad.
Look at you making good life decisions and stuff.
No.
All right, cool. Well, let's wrap up this introduction episode so that we can launch into part 1 of An Innocent Client. Because I have lots of questions.